Silence is what predators expect. They depend on it the way a thief depends on darkness. Not because silence means consent, but because it means isolation. It means no witnesses. It means fewer variables. When a room goes quiet, they believe control has already been won. Predators test silence early. It starts small. A comment that crosses a line. A hand that stays a second too long. A step closer than necessary. They watch carefully for the response. If the target freezes, looks down, or stays quiet, they take it as permission to continue. Not real permission, but the kind they invent to justify what they already want to do. Silence makes people invisible. It turns a living, breathing person into a problem no one else knows exists. In apartments, hotels, dorm rooms, and houses that look ordinary from the outside, silence keeps doors closed and blinds undisturbed. Neighbors hear nothing. Friends assume everything is fine. Time stretches, and in that stretch, predators feel safe. They count on shame doing their work for them. Shame keeps voices low. Shame convinces victims that speaking up will only make things worse. That no one will believe them. That they'll be blamed for being there, for trusting someone, for not leaving sooner. Silence becomes a shield, but not for the right person. Predators also rely on the social contract. The idea that people don't want to get involved. That even if someone hears something, they'll second-guess it. Maybe it's just a couple arguing. Maybe it's none of my business. Maybe I'm overreacting. Silence feeds those doubts. Without noise, there's no clear signal that something is wrong. In their minds, silence equals success. It means the situation is contained. It means the night will go according to plan. Control feels absolute when no one pushes back, when no sound breaks through the walls, when fear stays locked inside a chest instead of spilling into the air. But silence is heavy. It presses down on the person trapped inside it. It makes every second feel longer. Breathing becomes shallow. Thoughts race, then stall. The body goes into survival mode, choosing stillness because it feels safer than resistance. This isn't weakness. It's biology. The nervous system is trying to keep the person alive the only way it knows how in that moment. Predators misread this completely. They see stillness as surrender. They confuse fear with compliance. They don't understand that silence can be the result of shock, not choice. That the mind sometimes shuts doors before it finds a window. What they never plan for is the moment silence breaks. Because when it does, everything changes. Noise introduces risk. Noise attracts attention. Noise creates witnesses, records, memories that don't belong to them anymore. A raised voice, a scream, a cry through thin walls turns a private situation into a public one instantly. Sound carries power. It travels through vents, hallways, stairwells. It slips under doors and through cracked windows. It reaches people who weren't supposed to be part of the story. Once sound is out there, control starts to fracture. Predators fear that fracture more than resistance itself. They can overpower a person, but they can't overpower a neighborhood. They can intimidate one voice, but not dozens. Noise invites unpredictability, and unpredictability is what they avoid at all costs. Silence also isolates the predator from consequences. In quiet, there is no timeline. No one knows when it started or how long it's gone on. No one can intervene because no one knows intervention is needed. Silence erases urgency. Breaking silence doesn't guarantee safety, but it shifts the balance. It forces a recalculation. It signals that the person isn't disappearing quietly, that this moment won't stay contained, that even if help doesn't arrive immediately, the world has been alerted. That's why predators try to control sound early. They shush. They threaten. They cover mouths. They whisper warnings about what will happen if noise continues. They know that once silence is gone, their power leaks away fast. Silence is what they expect, what they plan for, what they depend on to turn fear into invisibility. And the moment that expectation fails, the entire night starts slipping out of their control. Crying as an act of resistance sounds backward to people who have never been forced into silence. We're taught that strength is quiet, controlled, composed. That making noise means losing dignity or control. But in moments of danger, crying can become the loudest form of defiance available. Crying disrupts the narrative predators try to write. They want fear without attention, pain without witnesses. Tears alone don't scare them, but the sound does. The sound signals distress in a way words sometimes can't. It cuts through walls and expectations. It tells anyone within reach that something is wrong right now. When someone cries loudly, it shatters the illusion of privacy. What was meant to stay hidden suddenly spills outward. The situation is no longer contained between two people. It becomes an event, something happening in real time that others can hear, question, and respond to. Crying is often the first sound the body produces when it runs out of polite options, when reasoning fails, when compliance doesn't work, when the nervous system pushes past restraint and chooses survival. In that sense, it's not weakness. It's instinct taking over. There's a reason the phrase "cry for help" exists. Long before language was refined, sound was how danger was communicated. A loud cry triggers attention even in people who don't want to be involved. It's hard to ignore. It bypasses logic and hits something more primal. Predators try to silence crying quickly because it changes the power dynamic. Noise creates uncertainty. Someone might knock. Someone might call the police. Someone might remember the sound later and connect it to what happened. Crying plants evidence in the air. Being told to cry louder is meant as humiliation. It's meant to mock pain and reinforce control. But when someone actually does cry louder, the meaning flips. What was meant to degrade becomes exposure. What was meant to entertain becomes risk. Loud crying can also interrupt the freeze response. When fear locks the body in place, producing sound forces breath to move. The chest expands. The body re-engages. That physical shift can open the door to further action, even if it's just seconds later. Crying loudly says, "I am here." It refuses erasure. It pushes back against the idea that this moment will disappear without consequence. Even if no one responds immediately, the sound itself becomes a record, a memory carried by anyone who hears it. There's also something defiant about refusing to protect the comfort of the person causing harm. Silence often serves the abuser more than the victim. Crying breaks that service. It prioritizes survival over politeness, truth over appearance. Society often judges crying harshly, especially when it's messy or uncontrolled. That judgment can keep people quiet when they shouldn't be. But in danger, dignity is a luxury. Survival doesn't require grace. It requires disruption. Crying loud can force a recalculation. The predator has to decide whether to continue or retreat, whether the risk is still worth it, whether control is slipping too fast. That moment of hesitation can be enough to change outcomes. It also invites connection. A neighbor pauses. A passerby listens. A door opens. Crying reaches people who might otherwise stay detached. It demands attention without asking permission. Crying as resistance isn't about hoping someone will rescue you. It's about refusing to cooperate with silence. It's about making the cost of harm higher than expected. It's about turning your own vulnerability into a signal that something is wrong. The sound of crying carries emotion that words can't fake easily. It's raw, unmistakable, and hard to dismiss. Even those who try to ignore it feel it register somewhere. In moments where control is being stolen, crying loudly becomes a way to take something back. Not strength in the traditional sense, but strength in refusing to vanish quietly. In forcing the world to hear what someone wanted to keep hidden. Underestimating the wrong person is rarely loud at first. It happens quietly, in assumptions made too fast and confidence built on shallow observations. A glance becomes a judgment. A posture becomes a conclusion. Someone looks small, tired, scared, or alone, and a story gets written for them without their consent. Predators thrive on these shortcuts. They believe strength announces itself clearly. That danger looks a certain way. That power wears a uniform or raises its voice early. When someone doesn't fit that image, they're dismissed as harmless, passive, incapable of resistance. This is where mistakes are born. Not dramatic ones, but subtle miscalculations. The belief that fear means weakness. That silence means submission. That compliance means surrender. Each assumption stacks on the next, building a false sense of control. Underestimation often starts with arrogance. The idea that experience in manipulation equals mastery over every situation. That patterns always repeat. That people react the same way under pressure. When someone has gotten away with harm before, they start trusting the formula more than the moment. They don't account for variables they can't see. Training that doesn't show on the surface. Mental conditioning forged under different kinds of pressure. Instincts sharpened by past survival. Allies nearby. Timing they didn't consider. They also underestimate resilience. The quiet kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that waits, adapts, absorbs, and chooses the right second to move. Resilience doesn't always look like defiance. Sometimes it looks like patience. People who are underestimated are often the ones paying attention. They notice shifts in tone, changes in breathing, the exact distance between bodies. They track exits, sounds, opportunities. While someone else is busy feeling powerful, they're gathering information. Underestimation creates blind spots. It makes people careless. They stop double-checking. They stop listening closely. They assume compliance will continue because it has so far. That assumption dulls their edge. History is full of moments where the underestimated changed everything. Not by overpowering, but by outlasting. Not by dominating, but by disrupting expectations. The surprise isn't in their strength, but in the fact that it was ignored for so long. There's also a cultural layer to underestimation. Certain people are taught that they will not be believed, not be taken seriously, not be defended. That belief can be weaponized against them, but it can also become a source of clarity. When you know you're being underestimated, you stop trying to perform strength for others and start conserving it for yourself. Underestimation can backfire the moment the situation shifts from controlled to chaotic. When noise enters, when witnesses appear, when the underestimated person makes a move no one expected. The confidence built on assumptions collapses quickly because it was never grounded in reality. Those moments don't come from nowhere. They're often the result of internal decisions made long before. A line drawn quietly. A refusal to disappear. A choice to act when the cost of staying still becomes higher than the risk of moving. Underestimating someone also means misunderstanding fear. Fear doesn't erase capability. It can sharpen it. It can compress focus. It can drive clarity when there's no room left for hesitation. Fear and strength are not opposites. They often coexist. When someone is underestimated, they are often given space unintentionally. Space to think. Space to wait. Space to choose. That space can become leverage. The most dangerous assumption is believing you know what someone will do next. That belief closes the mind. It narrows vision. It replaces awareness with expectation. And expectation is easy to exploit. Underestimating the wrong person doesn't always end with dramatic reversal. Sometimes it ends with a single moment where control slips. A pause that shouldn't have happened. A sound that wasn't anticipated. A reaction that breaks the script. In that moment, the power dynamic shifts, not because the underestimated person suddenly became someone else, but because they were never what they were assumed to be in the first place. Training that changes outcomes doesn't always look dramatic in the moment it's formed. It's built quietly, over time, through repetition that feels boring when nothing is at stake. Long hours, early mornings, correcting small mistakes most people would ignore. It's the kind of preparation that seems excessive until the moment everything depends on it. Real training isn't about confidence. It's about reducing hesitation. When pressure hits, the body doesn't rise to the occasion. It falls back on what it knows. Training carves pathways so the response happens before fear has time to interfere. That's what changes outcomes. Not bravery, but familiarity with stress. People often think training is about strength or speed. Those matter, but they're secondary. The real shift happens in perception. Trained minds see details others miss. They hear patterns in noise. They recognize when something is off even if they can't explain why yet. That awareness buys time, and time is everything. Training also teaches restraint. Knowing when not to act is just as important as knowing when to move. Acting too soon can make things worse. Acting too late can make action useless. Training sharpens judgment, so decisions land in that narrow window where they matter. Stress narrows vision for most people. Heart rate spikes. fine motor skills disappear. Thought fragments. Training accounts for that. It introduces stress on purpose, so the first time it's felt isn't during a real emergency. The body learns that panic doesn't mean shut down. It learns to function anyway. There's a difference between knowledge and conditioning. Knowledge lives in the mind. Conditioning lives in the body. In critical moments, the body often decides first. Training rewires instinct, so the body chooses better before the mind catches up. Training also strips away fantasy. It replaces assumptions with reality. You learn what actually works when plans break down. You learn how unpredictable people are, how quickly environments change, how fast control can vanish. That realism prevents shock when things go wrong. The most effective training is uncomfortable. It pushes people into controlled failure. It exposes weaknesses early when they can still be fixed. Ego gets bruised. Illusions get dismantled. What's left is capability grounded in truth, not belief. Training changes how fear is experienced. Fear doesn't disappear, but it stops being paralyzing. It becomes information, a signal to pay attention, not a command to freeze. That shift alone can decide outcomes. People without training often rely on hope. Hope that nothing will happen. Hope that someone else will intervene. Hope that talking will fix it. Training replaces hope with options. Even limited options are better than none. Another quiet effect of training is patience. Trained individuals understand timing. They know that not every second demands action. Waiting can be strategic. Letting a situation reveal itself can prevent mistakes. That patience can look like passivity to outsiders, but it isn't. Training also prepares people for aftermath, for what comes after the moment passes. The questions, the scrutiny, the emotional impact. That preparation doesn't erase consequences, but it prevents collapse under them. When training changes outcomes, it often goes unnoticed. The situation de-escalates. Damage is minimized. A crisis never fully forms. From the outside, it looks like nothing happened. That's often the point. People tend to celebrate dramatic rescues and last-second saves. But training is about preventing the need for drama. It's about positioning so the worst-case scenario never fully arrives. Training also teaches accountability. There's no blaming luck or fate. Actions have reasons. Decisions have weight. That mindset carries over into how responsibility is handled afterward. The most dangerous misunderstanding is thinking training makes someone eager to act. Often, it does the opposite. It makes them cautious. It makes them aware of consequences others don't see. Training that changes outcomes doesn't announce itself. It doesn't boast. It shows up as calm where there should be chaos, as precision where there should be panic, as a series of small, correct choices made under pressure that most people never notice, but that quietly alter the direction everything was about to take. One moment that flips control is rarely the moment people expect. It's not always loud or dramatic. Often it's small, almost invisible to anyone who isn't directly involved. A shift in attention, a sound that shouldn't be there, a hesitation that lasts half a second too long. Control is fragile, even when it looks absolute. It depends on momentum, on fear staying contained, on everyone playing the role assigned to them. The second one piece moves out of place, the structure starts to wobble. That moment often begins internally. A decision made quietly. A line crossed in the mind before anything changes in the room. The choice to stop complying, to stop protecting someone else's comfort, to stop believing the situation is fixed. Externally, it might look like nothing, but internally, it's a pivot. Once that decision is made, behavior shifts. Breathing changes. Posture changes. Focus narrows. The person who was reacting starts acting. Sometimes the flip comes from interruption. A knock. A voice from another room. A phone ringing at the wrong time. These interruptions seem minor, but they fracture control. They remind everyone involved that the world is bigger than this moment. Control thrives in isolation. Anything that connects the situation to the outside weakens it. Even the idea that someone else might notice can be enough to force hesitation. The flip can also come from unpredictability. Control relies on patterns. When someone does something unexpected, the script breaks. The person in control has to think instead of dominate, and thinking takes time. Fear plays a role on both sides. When fear shifts direction, control shifts with it. The moment the person causing harm starts calculating risk instead of enjoying certainty, the balance changes. One moment can also flip control because it reveals truth. The truth that compliance was never consent, that silence was never surrender, that the situation isn't as contained as it seemed. Once that truth surfaces, it can't be unseen. These moments don't guarantee safety. They don't erase danger, but they create opportunity. A narrow window where outcomes are still in motion instead of locked in. People often underestimate how fast control can unravel. What took time to build can collapse in seconds. Authority built on intimidation disappears when intimidation stops working. The flip might come from a physical action, but it can also come from sound. A cry, a shout, a name called out. Sound introduces witnesses, even if none arrive immediately. The possibility alone changes behavior. Sometimes the moment is forced. Sometimes it's seized. Either way, it marks a transition. Before, one side dictated terms. After, nothing is certain. Control also depends on belief. The belief that resistance won't happen, that consequences won't arrive, that the situation will follow familiar patterns. When that belief cracks, control becomes reactive instead of proactive. A single moment can also flip control by restoring agency. Agency doesn't mean overpowering someone. It means making choices again. Even limited choices matter. Choosing when to speak, when to move, when to stop playing along. In many stories, people look back and identify that exact second when everything changed. Not because it was loud, but because it felt different. The air shifted. The certainty drained out of the room. The danger of these moments is that they're easy to miss. Hesitation can close the window just as quickly as it opened. That's why instinct and preparation matter. Recognizing the moment is as important as creating it. One moment that flips control doesn't come from nowhere. It's the result of pressure building, of small decisions stacking, of limits being reached. When it arrives, it doesn't ask for permission. It demands action. Once control flips, even briefly, the situation is no longer one-sided. The future becomes uncertain again. And uncertainty is the one thing absolute control cannot survive. Justice arriving uninvited is rarely announced. It doesn't knock politely or wait to be invited into the story. It shows up when someone assumes no one is watching, no one is listening, and no consequences are close enough to matter. Most wrongdoing depends on timing, on privacy, on the belief that the moment is sealed off from the rest of the world. Justice disrupts that belief. It appears when control feels settled and the outcome feels decided. People imagine justice as a courtroom or a verdict. But before it ever becomes formal, justice often arrives as interruption. A presence that wasn't accounted for. A witness who wasn't supposed to exist. A variable that collapses a carefully constructed sense of safety. Justice is uninvited because it isn't convenient. It doesn't wait for the right hour or the right conditions. It doesn't care about plans made in bad faith. It arrives because something crossed a line, not because someone was ready to face the result. Those who expect immunity often confuse silence with protection. They believe that if no one speaks, nothing follows. Justice challenges that illusion. It proves that actions echo even when they were meant to disappear. Sometimes justice arrives through people. A stranger, a neighbor, someone trained to notice what others overlook. Someone who recognizes a signal and refuses to ignore it. These people don't always see themselves as heroes. They simply act when something feels wrong. Other times, justice arrives through circumstance. A door left unlocked. A sound carrying farther than expected. A moment of carelessness. These details seem small until they change everything. Justice arriving uninvited doesn't always fix the past. It doesn't erase harm, but it interrupts continuation. It stops a situation from unfolding exactly as planned. That alone can be enough to change lives. There's a shock that comes with unexpected accountability. The realization that the world is not as empty as it seemed. That someone noticed. That actions have weight beyond intention. That moment strips away confidence built on secrecy. Justice also carries speed. When it arrives uninvited, it doesn't linger. It moves quickly, forcing decisions under pressure. Retreat, explain, escape, confront. The luxury of control disappears. For those on the receiving end of harm, uninvited justice can feel surreal. Relief mixed with disbelief. A sudden shift from isolation to visibility. The knowledge that the moment didn't vanish quietly after all. Justice doesn't always look gentle. Sometimes it's abrupt. Sometimes it's forceful. Sometimes it's just the end of something that was never supposed to continue. Its role isn't comfort. It's correction. There's also a myth that justice only comes when summoned, when reported, when pursued relentlessly. But history shows otherwise. Many outcomes turn on chance encounters and unexpected interventions. Justice finds cracks the way water does. Uninvited justice exposes the flaw in every plan built on harm. The flaw is assuming total control, assuming the environment will cooperate, assuming people will stay passive, assuming the world will look away. When justice appears without warning, it rebalances power instantly. The dynamic shifts from dominance to defense, from certainty to scrambling, from confidence to calculation. It also sends a message beyond the moment itself. That silence isn't guaranteed. That privacy isn't absolute. That even when no one seems present, the possibility of consequence still exists. Justice arriving uninvited doesn't ask whether it's welcome. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't explain itself first. It simply changes the trajectory, often in seconds. For those who never expected it, the arrival feels unfair, sudden, disruptive. For those who needed it, it feels overdue, even if it came by surprise. Justice doesn't always wear a badge or deliver a speech. Sometimes it's just the end of a night that was supposed to go very differently. A plan cut short. A story rewritten mid-sentence. And once justice has arrived uninvited, nothing can return to the version of events that depended on it never showing up, because the illusion of isolation is gone, replaced by the understanding that the world has a way of stepping in, even when it was never asked to.